So we're finally at the first Mercury retrograde of 2024. And although every Mercury retrograde has its quirks, this one's actually going to be really intense and really interesting. In this video, I'm going to cover everything that you need to know about this Mercury retrograde in Aries happening this April. And make sure you stick around all the way to the end because I'm going to be going over how it's going to affect your zodiac sign. A Mercury retrograde is when Mercury is going to be going in between the sun and the earth, and it's an optical illusion where it looks like Mercury is going backwards. Mercury retrogrades are really popularized in modern pop astrology. And the reason being is they're really well known for, things, breaking down, technology failing, miscommunications. And so there's a lot of this fear around Mercury retrogrades. And what I like to tell people is they're not always the worst case scenario. They're not always typically that bad. However, they do come with some problems. So let me first go over the logistics of this Mercury retrograde, and then we're going to explain what it all means. So number one, Mercury is going to be entering shadow on March 18th at 15 degrees, and that's going to be at 9:25 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. So that would be 8 p.m. Pacific Time. Then Mercury is going to be stationing retrograde on April 1st. So yes, April Fool's Day is when Mercury is going to be stationing retrograde. It's going to be stationing retrograde at 27 degrees Aries at 4:15 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. Then the halfway point of the Mercury retrograde, which is the Mercury cazimi, this is when Mercury conjoins the sun. This is going to be happening at 22 degrees Aries, and this is going to be happening at 5:03 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. Then Mercury stations direct. We're all done with the Mercury retrograde on April 25th. Again, this is stationing direct at 15 degrees and 58 minutes Aries, and that's going to be stationing direct at 6:54 a.m. early that morning. And then, of course, Mercury leaves its shadow. That means we're all done with this whole Mercury retrograde phase by May 13th. So that's about 2 months of Mercury staying in the exact same part of the sky. So let's start to talk about how this is significant. So number one, the first thing is Mercury is going to be entering shadow, which means this will be the place in the sky that it comes all the way back to once it stations direct. And Mercury will be conjoining the north node as it enters shadow. This is really important because if you don't know what the nodes are essentially mathematical calculations of where the eclipses will be at any given time. The north node is a very hot and hungry thing. It's what we always want to consume and go towards. So the north node really turns things up to 11, and it's in the zodiac sign of Aries. So we are talking about, again, fights, conflicts, drive, ambition. What do we want to create? What do we want to start? What do we want to begin and initiate? The north node in Aries is this drive for war, this drive for ambition, this drive for energy. So now as Mercury enters Aries, Mercury is all about our mind, our thinking, our rationale, planning, logistics. And so while Mercury is in Aries, the way I want to analogize this Mercury retrograde is like the movie 1917. If you haven't seen the movie 1917 yet, essentially the whole movie is shot in a World War I bunker, and it's about two soldiers getting word that their big, war plan, it's actually a plot and they're going to be counterattacked. So in this whole movie, they go from one end to the trench all the way to the other to let people know that this is a bad plan. And I think that's the perfect example of a Mercury retrograde in Aries. Mercury's about plans, retrogrades are about things going backwards, things changing, things being miscommunicated, and it's in the sign of Aries, like war, attack, actions. And so I want you to think about Mercury retrograde in Aries as a change of war plans. What is your battle plan? What is your game plan? And what needs to be changed around here? And that change might come from some sort of line of communication. You might think you're supposed to be doing one thing, but something might come in and you might go, oh, I need to change this, I need to change that. And Mercury retrogrades are really well known for delays. They're really well known for things taking a long time, going backwards with things, and revising your plans. So one of my things to emphasize is having patience during this Mercury retrograde, and that's why I wanted to say this when talking about Mercury conjoining the North Node. Mercury conjoining the North Node in Aries is like pushing the big red button. It is like, you know what? I'm going to act first, think later. I'm going to shoot first and ask questions later. And Mercury conjoining the North Node is this impulsive decision making, this impulsive rationale of okay, this is what I'm going to do. This is what I'm going to do. And maybe I'm not ready yet, but I'm going to do it anyway. And you might be in a situation in which that might be the best thing to do. However, you just have to know actions have consequences, and you will have to come back to that decision. You will have to come back to that moment that you decide, or that thought that you get, or that plan that you make, or that communication that you receive on March 18th. So the other reason this Mercury retrograde is so important is that Mercury will be stationing retrograde on April 1st, right? But 7 days later, we get the total solar eclipse in Aries. Now, like I said before, each Mercury retrograde has its quirks, but this is really interesting that Mercury's entering shadow on the North Node, which represents where the eclipses are at. And then it's going to retrograde in the same exact sign that we have a solar eclipse in Aries at. Now, what's this talk about an eclipse? Eclipses are these major beginnings or major endings of things. They're kind of like a new moon or a full moon, but on steroids and taken to the extreme. And astrologers refer to the time in between eclipses as eclipse season. Our first eclipse is going to be the lunar eclipse in Libra that happens on March 25th, and then we get our solar eclipse on April 8th. This 2-week time period is a really weird phase in time where everything feels really extreme and things are kind of shifting and changing. My biggest piece of advice when it comes to eclipses is they feel like emergency events. They feel like you absolutely have to act or do something, but you don't always have to. Like sometimes inaction is the best action. And where you might feel this impulse to make a decision and be very decisive, maybe think twice about what exactly that you're doing. You don't absolutely have to react to something happening, but you can respond. Also, it's important that the solar eclipse is happening over America. This is another great American eclipse. I will have a video all about that coming up. But Mercury goes retrograde, right? So with Mercury going retrograde, we are rethinking, we are revising, we are reviewing, we are going backwards, we are having delays in the zodiac sign of Aries. Now again, Aries is attacking, confronting, starting, initiating, ambition. But more importantly, you have to understand what house Aries rules over in your chart. And of course, make sure you tune into the end of the video because that's where I'm going to be talking about how it's going to be affecting you specifically in your chart. But as Mercury goes retrograde and we have this moment of, oh, this is a change of plans, this is where the delay begins, we have the solar eclipse in Aries a week later where there's a really big reset, there's a really big change, there's a really big immediate action that happens. And you're going to know what this is before Mercury goes retrograde. When Mercury enters shadow on March 18th, that is when the themes of the Mercury retrograde will become prevalent. And oftentimes, a lot of people talk about Mercury being in shadow more Mercury retrograde than the actual Mercury retrograde. Like, for example, when Mercury enters shadow, this is when your phone starts glitching. This is when you start having problems with tech. And then it's not until the Mercury retrograde where it actually breaks down and you have to, like, buy a new phone or fix your computer. So then by the time Mercury stations retrograde on April 1st, this is when it's like, okay, I knew that this was coming. I knew that I had to make these plans. I know that I have to work backwards from here. I know I have to revise this. I know I have to rethink this whole area. And maybe again, that might just be delays in this area. But then this eclipse happens. And eclipses really do shift the timeline for you. They're really big doors opening or closing in a specific area of your life. So an eclipse in Aries is already really, really important. Again, depending on what's house Aries rules in your chart, that would be a big chapter ending or beginning in that part of your chart. But with Mercury retrograde being there, it's like our minds are really focused on it now. And now there's more delays and there's more things that we didn't expect happening here. And then we get the Mercury cazimi, and this is happening on April 11th. A lot of people get really hung up on that term cazimi and what it means. And all it really means is when a planet conjoins the sun or the sun conjoins a planet. And it's that planet being reset. It's that planet being, restarted. The way I like to explain it is the Mercury cazimi in the middle of a Mercury retrograde. This is the interior conjunction, not the exterior conjunction. But this is the halfway point of the Mercury retrograde. And this is where you find out what the problem was and what the solution is. It's like Mercury enters shadow. Okay, you're getting all these weird things. Things are happening. You know that they're going to have to be, addressed. Mercury goes retrograde. You're forced to address them. Then we have the Mercury cazimi where you're like, oh, this is what the problem was. And now that I know what the problem was to begin with, I now know what the solution is moving forward. So you'll probably have a lot more clarity on the situation at hand on April 11th. Then one of the other little quirks that we get with this Mercury retrograde is that it will be conjoining Venus. Now, Mercury and Venus are never really all too far apart from one another, so this isn't really an uncommon conjunction, but I still think it's worth talking about. Venus is about pleasure and about desire and love and connection, but she's in her sign of detriment in Aries. Now, people also get really hung up on that word detriment, and they think, oh, I have Venus in Aries, I can never be loved, and I'll never have love, blah, 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 blah. And that's not necessarily true. You see, Venus still has to do its job, which is, again, having fun, connecting with people, making relationships, having pleasure. But when she's in her sign of detriment, she's in the zodiac sign that is the opposite of those qualities. Aries is again about war, drive, confrontation, attacking. And so with Venus in Aries, I like to think of this as kind of like stealing a cookie from the cookie jar. You're doing something bad, but there's something fun about it. Venus in Aries is also liking the drama, liking the intensity, liking the, pushing the button. And as Mercury is retrograde and making a conjunction to Venus, Mercury often holds a microphone up to planets, and it's kind of letting that planet communicate something. And while Venus is in Aries and our desire and our sense of love and connection is a little bit more heated up, it's a little bit more intensified. It's like a soap opera drama. Sometimes we just like the dramas. Venus in Aries reminds me of a crime of passion or something like that. But as Mercury conjoins Venus, Mercury's retrograde, right? So we're rethinking things, we're re-understanding things, and it's conjoining Venus in Aries. We have this innate pleasure and this desire, and it's, we're doing something that we are kind of enjoying at the moment, but maybe we didn't expect to enjoy, or maybe something that we typically don't enjoy, we are having fun with right now. And Mercury conjoining Venus is just kind of getting that clued in, having oh, I can understand this. I can have fun with this. So the Mercury-Venus conjunction again happens on April 19th. And I think this is kind of a nice transit to, again, rethink exactly it is what we want and what we desire. But then we have Mercury stationing direct on April 25th, and this is on the North Node. So like I said before, when Mercury enters shadow on the North Node, it's pushing the big red button. Mercury coming back and conjoining the North Node is coming back to that, why did I push the big red button, and do I need to push it again? Another way I would analogize this Mercury retrograde is if you've ever shot a gun before, there's times where you pull up the gun, you're looking downrange, and you're anticipating pulling the trigger and feeling that recoil and feeling that bullet come out, but you'll pull the trigger and it just goes click, And it's kind of like the shocking feeling of like, whoa, like I was expecting something intense and nothing happened. That's almost what Mercury entering shadow conjoining the North Node is. Like you're expecting this really big thing and then it goes click. And the Mercury retrograde is like, okay, was your gun jammed? Did it not cycle correctly? What was the issue here? And then Mercury conjoining the North Node, stationing direct again on April 25th is like, all right, it's loaded, the jam's cleared, everything should function. I should be able to be ready to pull the trigger and expect the recoil and the bullet should come out of there. This whole Mercury North Node business is like, okay, Mercury's on the North Node. We're like, we want to make this, attack. We want to make this plan. We want to do this. We want to do that. We have this really, really big impulse. As Mercury goes retrograde, we have to redo our plans. We have to revisit things. There's going to be some delays. And as Mercury goes back on the North Node, it is again intensifying moving forward. The way I'd like to analogize it is if you are late for going to a road trip, it's like you're rushing to get out the door, you're doing this, you're doing that, and then you get out the door, you're going, and you forgot something super, super, super important. So you have to go backwards, and then you rush to get home, and you load up whatever you forgot, and then now you're really trying to go fast because now you're a little bit late. That's how I think of this Mercury retrograde in Aries. Something else to note about this Mercury retrograde in Aries is that it's happening in the most intense time of this year. The end of March through April has so many big things going on. We have this Mercury retrograde, we have eclipse season, we have the Mars-Saturn conjunction, we have the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction. April really is the highlight of the year, and I think it's really interesting that we get this Mercury retrograde with it. So if you want to keep up to date with where this Mercury retrograde is going to be at with your chart, and you want to get notifications of when it's going to make an aspect to something in your natal chart or conjoin a planet in your natal chart, make sure you check out the astro calendar that I have in the link in the description below. It is amazing. I use it literally every single day, and it's all the astrology transits hitting your specific chart put on your calendar. So whether that's you have an iPhone or you're using Google Calendar rather than opening up an app and trying to go through all of that, you just get the notification on your calendar of when a transit is happening to you. It helps support the channel. I love it. We've had literally thousands of other people purchase it and they love it as well. And I think you'll enjoy it too. So let's now talk about how this Mercury retrograde is going to affect your zodiac sign. So starting with Aries, Mercury is going to be retrograding in your first house. The first house is all about your identity, the way that you see yourself, your body, like literally your physical body and your looks. While we're having an eclipse in your first house, you're going to be really amped up. You're going to be really, really driven, but there's going to be a way that you kind of see yourself differently. Like a Mercury retrograde in the first house is either you're going to be communicating something incorrect, someone's going to communicate something to you incorrect, but you're kind of seeing yourself differently in a new light. Like I said, it can involve you miscommunicating something. So like be really clear about what you say to others and like mean what you say, but don't say it means sort of a thing. But this might be a delay with something that you're doing with your body, like some sort of, again, maybe like a surgery, or maybe it does involve sort of a surgery, but there is some sort of like a delay, a rethinking, or a review, or a change related to your identity, your body, and yourself. So for the Taurus risings, this Mercury retrograde is going to be happening in your 12th house. Now, the 12th house isn't really all that fun. It rules things like isolation, alienation, the subconscious, fears, phobias, and hidden enemies, as well as self-sabotage. Now, the good part about the 12th house is it is all about kind of like isolating yourself to heal. Like, sometimes you just need a vacation where you don't tell anyone where you go and you just need to run away. But you guys are Taurus risings. You guys are very like stable, chill. But Aries, which is like fights and combatants, rules like your 12th house, where it's like the subconscious. Like you might have a lot of pent up anger that you don't really know how to channel all the way. And a Mercury retrograde in your 12th house is like definitely a little psychosis moment, definitely a little bit too lost in your head, maybe like holding on to anger or grudges a little bit too much. But you also might have some sort of a illness or some sort of an injury. And when I say that, I don't mean you're going to get fucking diagnosed with cancer, but more so of like, hey, you might have some sort, like, again, you might get a cold and you're like, I don't even know where this is coming from. Why do I feel this way? Why do I feel weird? Mercury does rule your second house of money and finances, and as well as your fifth house of love, romance, sex, pleasure, art, music, and recreation, and children. So you might have some fears about money coming up, or you might be like self-sabotaging yourself with money, as well as you might be really thinking about love, romance, sex, and pleasure. And if the things that you say that you like, or the things that you say that you enjoy, you might say, do I actually enjoy these things? Am I sabotaging myself through vices or, through this, sort of romantic relationship, or how I go about love and romance? Now for the Gemini risings, Mercury is going to be retrograding in your 11th house of friends and community. Now, this is really important. Mercury is your ruling planet, so whatever Mercury is doing is going to be more important for you than most other zodiac signs. So Mercury retrograding your 11th house, this is easy. You're going to have some delays and miscommunications with friends. That's the simple part of it. You might be making some new friends, or maybe join a new community event, again, make some new friends. Or again, you might kind of lose some friends and cut some friends off. Mercury also rules your 4th house of home and family and living situation. And so while the ruler of your 4th house of home, family, living situation is retrograding the 11th house of friends, If your friends are your roommates, this might be, again, a conflict with a roommate, a conflict with some sort of person that you live with. This might be a miscommunication or a delay or a change with the shared resources around this living situation as well. For the Cancer risings, Mercury is going to be retrograding in your 10th house of career. Now, you guys have had and will continue to have a lot of big transits happening in your 10th house of career. So there's a lot of, like, I think, momentum building up. And especially with this eclipse happening in your 10th house, there's kind of like a really big shift happening. So this Mercury retrograde is like delays, miscommunication, and changing of plans regarding your boss, regarding like your literal company, regarding your career. Not so much like your schedule, but more so of like the job title itself. Mercury does rule your 12th house of hidden enemies, isolation, and alienation. And so this might bring up, again, like some falling out with a coworker. Maybe you had a secret shopper that gives you a bad review and you have to deal with management in some way. Mercury also rules your 3rd house of communication, technology, short distance travel, siblings, neighbors, and like really how you utilize the knowledge that you have. So there might be this kind of like rethinking all of the tools at your arsenal and how you implement them in your career. This might be like changing the way that you communicate when it comes to your work, when it comes to your boss. Or as well, this might be dealing with some short distance travel stuff related to work. Leo risings. This Mercury retrograde is happening in your 9th house. The 9th house rules spirituality, religion, publishing, broadcasting, social media, far distance travel, foreign countries. It also does rule things like lawsuits. That could also be a 7th house thing. That gets a little complicated. So Mercury retrograding here as well as this eclipse there's a really big shift happening here. Maybe you have this impulse to go to a different country. Maybe you have this impulse to go back to school. Maybe you start, diving into a wormhole on education somewhere and you get really interested in some sort of subject. There might be a delay with traveling. There might be a delay with your education. There might be a delay or an issue related to social media. Like maybe you get banned off social media. But Mercury also rules your 11th house of friends and community and networks, and that's retrograding in your 9th house. So if you have friends that are related to 9th house topics, maybe they're from school, maybe they're from a different country, maybe it's related to social media, or again, like spiritual stuff, religious stuff, astrology stuff, there might be some miscommunications here and some delays here, and there also might be an opportunity to make new friends here. But Mercury also rules your 2nd house of money, finances, and resources. So again, if this is college related, this might be a delay in funding. This might be a delay in payment related to school payments or, again, tuition or whatever that looks like. Or again, a delay with money related to travel. Virgo risings. This one's really important for you because Mercury not only rules your 1st house of you, yourself, your body, your image, and how you communicate, but it also rules your 10th house of career, reputation, and legacy. So these are really big parts of your life, right? And Mercury is going to go retrograde in your 8th house of other people's resources, shared resources, death, debt, inheritance, secrets. So if you like work off of commission or you're working towards a bonus, this might be a delay in that funding. This might also have to deal with like literally like things like inheritances, or again, you might have a family member pass, or one of your family members are redoing their will and you have to be really involved in that. This might be a delay in payments when it comes to debt or servicing that debt. Or on the flip side, this could become like, hey, maybe you just go balls to the wall trying to get yourself out of debt and you just handle all of your payments during this time. And again, there also might be a situation in which you have to go into debt because of work things or because something else goes wrong. Libra risings. This Mercury retrograde's happening in your 7th house. This one's easy. This is a big relationship change for you guys. You have the North Node in Aries in your 7th house. So there's a lot of focus. Like if you're married, there's a huge focus on your partner. They've got a lot going on in their lives. They're really busy. And then on the flip side, like you're really tired. Now, if you're single, this is like a whole, like, again, you start talking to somebody, you meet somebody, there's a significant shift within a relationship that's happening here. Mercury does rule your 9th house of beliefs, far distance travel, spirituality, and religion. And so there might be this kind of belief shift related to a relationship. The 9th house also rules social media. So again, maybe it's someone that you're engaging with on social media. But Mercury also rules your 12th house as well, which rules isolation, alienation, the subconscious, fears, phobias, hidden enemies, self-sabotage. And so there might be this kind of impulse to sabotage a relationship, or you might be going into negative and bad behaviors again related to a relationship. So I'd really kind of pay attention to like what's going on with you in this relationship, and are you doing it out of like the impulse and like doing something bad that you know that you shouldn't do, or do you have a lot of fears and blockages stopping you from actually pursuing something that's good? And like I said, if you're married, this is like everything to do with your partner. This will probably be a miscommunication on them, but they also have like when you're married, the 7th house almost has nothing to do with you. It has everything to do with your partner. And there are like they've got a billion things going on. They're going to be going really, really fast. And you might just have to kind of like pay more attention to them. And there might be more delays. And with that, more miscommunications and things like that. For the Scorpio risings, Mercury is going to be going retrograde in your 6th house. This is about work and employment, not necessarily your career, but like this would be like your schedule, your day-to-day job, not necessarily like your title. Like, for example, if your title is I'm a graphic designer, your 6th house is more of like, okay, but more specifically, I make specific ads for this specific company. The 6th house is more of like the labor that goes into the title that you have. It also rules things like pets. It also rules things like, again, ill health. And as we have this eclipse here and this Mercury retrograde here, there's kind of a really big change in this area. So maybe you get a new job, maybe you quit your job to start a different job. Again, watch out for injury. Like there's a really big potential for injury or illness here. And again, that's not a death sentence. You're not going to get cancer or something like that, but just more so of like, you're going a little bit too hard at the gym, you pull a muscle, and that's the kind of injury I'm looking at here. Mercury does rule your 8th house of other people's money, shared resources, death, debt, and inheritance. And so Mercury being your 8th ruler going retrograde in the 6th house might be a death related to a pet. It might be even a death related to a coworker. But there might be some miscommunications and delays and issues regarding shared resources regarding work. As well, Mercury rules your 11th house of friends and community and networks. And so with this being, again, the ruler of friends, and it's going retrograde in your 6th house of coworkers, by the way, this might be a miscommunication with your coworkers that you're friends with, or maybe you make a friend with a coworker that you weren't necessarily anticipating. So for the Sag risings, Mercury is going to be going retrograde in your 5th house of love, romance, sex, pleasure, art, music, recreation, children, as well as vices like drugs and alcohol. So this is a really big rethinking and shifting of this area for you. Mercury rules your 10th house of career, reputation, and legacy, as well as your 7th house of relationships. So this might be a big, significant relationship change that starting, that's very fun and very sexual and very again, fun is the easy way to put it. This might be a miscommunication with one of your kids. If you have kids, I would just expect a lot of trouble with your kids if you're a Sag rising. But it's also your 10th house ruler. So again, career and reputation, it's going retrograde in your 5th house. Is there a way that you could be more creative with your work? Are you starting a new creative, business, or are you putting more of your work of, whether that's art or music out there in the world? This will be a delay in that. This will be a rethinking of that, but it's very impulsive and there's kind of a lot of just significant change happening in this area to begin with. So for the Capricorn risings, Mercury is going to be going retrograde in your 4th house of home and family and living situation. So this is typically like a miscommunication with parents, some sort of electrical issue with your home, with your living situation, like a fuse box blows or something like that. Maybe this is about moving. Maybe you're planning on moving. Maybe you're looking at different places to live. But Mercury also rules your 9th house of spirituality, religion, far distance travel. Maybe you're thinking about moving to a foreign country. Maybe you're thinking about moving back to your home country. And Mercury also rules your 6th house of work, labor, health, routines, pets, and coworkers. And so again, maybe this is like a coworker moves in with you. Maybe your job is going hybrid and you get to spend more time working at home. And maybe you need to make a little bit of an office space for your home. Either way, this is a really significant shift with your living situation, given the eclipse that's happening here. And I think just your mind's going to be really focused on how do I navigate issues and problems and delays regarding my parents and regarding my living situation. So for the Aquarius rising, Mercury is going to be going retrograde in your 3rd house. This is kind of complicated. The 3rd house kind of rules a lot of different things. It rules short distance travel, siblings, neighbors, communication, technology, more so of hardware. It rules how you implement knowledge. And so Mercury just going retrograde in your 3rd might be literally you change the way that you go to work. The 3rd house is your local community, the people that are closest to you. Maybe you have a miscommunication with a neighbor. Maybe you have a miscommunication with a sibling. Maybe there's construction on your usual route to work and you have to take a new route to work that takes a little bit longer. That would probably be where my money's really at with this one. But Mercury also rules your 5th house of love, romance, sex, pleasure, art, music, recreation. 5th house ruler going retrograde in the 3rd. Is it the girl next door? I'm just being funny there. But, are you doing more creative things with your neighbor? Are you partying more with your neighbor? Maybe you guys are playing games together and having more fun, or maybe that's a sibling. But Mercury also rules your 8th house of other people's resources and shared resources. And it also rules things like death and inheritance. And so there is this kind of really extreme, weird part of this Mercury retrograde happening for you guys. Because again, it's your 8th ruler of other people's money, shared resources, death, debt, inheritance. And that's going retrograde in your 3rd house of siblings, neighbors, and shit like that. And then for the Pisces risings, Mercury is going to be going retrograde in your 2nd house of money. So there is going to be quite a big shift related to money and finances and resources in during this Mercury retrograde because of the eclipse. Mercury is going to be about delays, miscommunications, a change of thought, a change of rationale related to money. Now, Mercury does rule your 7th house of relationships. So this is kind of like, again, if you are in a relationship, this might be a big conversation between you and your partner about money. Also, this might be you spending a lot more money on your partner or vice versa. And then Mercury also rules your 4th house of home, family, and living situation, where that's going retrograde in the 2nd house. Maybe you have to spend some bigger money on your house or your living situation that you don't have, so you have to reorganize your finances in order to, fix that situation. But there's a lot going on in money related to you guys this month. And that's this Mercury retrograde in Aries. If you've made it all the way here at the end, comment below and let me know what you guys think. Let me know what you guys are expecting. And make sure you like this video if you haven't already. Make sure you subscribe so you keep up to date with all of the transits that are happening throughout the year. And thank you so much for watching. I love and appreciate you guys, and I'll be seeing you guys next time.